Let's dive right in to talk about the tea on being a medical speech language pathologist and ultimately why I'm sitting here in a sound booth in my office where I am not practicing as a medical speech language pathologist, why that is, why I'm really not practicing anymore, and kind of what the dirty parts of being a medical speech language pathologist are. So, hi, I'm Julia. I've been a medical speech language pathologist since 2009. Prior to that, I worked in different roles in healthcare. I've actually worked in healthcare since about 2001. So, 2009 was when I got my specialized degree in speech language pathology. I specifically did seek out this career. I understood what I was getting into. At the time, I worked in a SNF from 2001 to 2009 in different like tech roles. I knew the industry very well, and things have changed. The field of speech pathology has changed. And I want to talk about some of those things and kind of why you see a lot of medical speech language pathologists maybe saying some more negative things about the field, but also know that my experience is my opinion. This isn't true for everybody. I know I just wish that somebody would talk a little bit more about the negatives and not always just the positives of the field, specifically in education. Graduate programs obviously want to boost their rankings, they want to boost their intake of students because students equal money. So they want to keep their programs alive. I don't see a lot of programs kind of getting into the nitty gritty of kind of what sucks in our field. And I don't always blame them either because I think the people in education and academia, the professors, are really far removed. And honestly, if I left clinical practice in 2009 to go and work in a university and I hadn't really been into clinical since then, or maybe very sparsely into clinical, I probably wouldn't feel the way I do about it now. But because I've been submerged in clinical practice so deeply and really just stepped away from it maybe over the past year, these thoughts are all fresh and I kind of want to get them out of my mind before I completely maybe transition and leave the field altogether. So let's talk about it. First of all, let's say something great about being a medical speech language pathologist, which is you can be a med SLP and work as little as you want to. So I took my last travel assignment about a year ago. I primarily do content and have a business teaching people how to take travel assignments. I love travel. I love travel assignments. Unfortunately, my business has really grown and I haven't been able to find the time to actually take an assignment. But I love travel. One thing I really love about it is it can help you transition out of the field, just like I did. That's another story for another day. That being said, because I've been so busy with my digital marketing business, I do digital marketing and copywriting for other people. I haven't been able to work that much as an SLP. Regardless, I work like 1 day a month, and my employers are happy to have me do that. I could realistically probably take a couple of years off of work and still get back into med SLP jobs. There's always a job out there to some degree. Unfortunately, it's often less than we want to work. So what I started out with as a pro, like you can kind of work as little as you want to. If you want to be a med SLP, do like a 9 to 5 job in some other career, maybe during the week or some other setting, and then just do med SLP like on the weekends, totally fine. There's going to be somebody that's going to pick you up for that work. However, the problem lies in when you need to fully support yourself off of this income. More and more, it's getting harder to find salaried positions or positions that will give you 40 hours a week, or just full-time positions with benefits. So as Medicare has been unfortunately decreasing their reimbursements over the years, facilities are really tightening down on what they want to pay SLPs. So they're trying to basically only pay us for hours worked and they want those hours worked to be productive, meaning we're face to face with a client. They're not wanting to pay much, if anything, to write reports or talk to staff or do care plan meetings, anything like that. They just want us kind of like factories in the buildings doing therapy, billing, and then getting out. So that's kind of one of the ongoing issues I have with a lot of med SLP jobs is it can be hard to find a stable position, a position that's willing to keep you in the facility, whether you have patients to treat or not. And so often with med SLP, like we can't control who comes into our facilities. If I'm working at a SNF and everybody coming in is just not appropriate for my therapy, I can't make them be appropriate. And we're actually going to side tangent. We're actually going to kind of get into that a little later in this talk, where I talk about some of the ethical concerns about medical speech language pathology. But often when you're working in hospitals, SNFs, home health, like you're not advertising for patients to get in there. So it's not like you're specifically saying, okay, all the neuro patients come here, all the respiratory patients come here. You're at the mercy of what comes to you. So getting hours, getting full-time work can kind of be out of your control, and it can be hard to secure those full-time positions. So great thing about med SLP, it can be very flexible. If you have another source of income, it can be great. It's harder when you're supporting yourself. And believe me, I've always supported myself, single income, always paid my own rent, no family to help. So believe me, I've been there. It has been a struggle finding full-time work. And kind of going off on the finding full-time work, we have to remember we're paying a lot of money for these degrees. So graduate programs are at least 2 years. And I say at least 2 years because if you come into a graduate program with an undergraduate major in CSD, communication sciences and disorders, you can generally get out in 2 years. If not, it would probably be like a 3 to 4 year program. So we're paying upwards of $50,000, $100,000 or more for these degrees, and then to come out and not have these like stable job opportunities, it's frustrating. We're also in a lot of debt. At its height, my student loan payments were over $1,000 a month. It's frustrating. It really is. You put all this money into this degree, and then you're like, gee, the jobs aren't there. Like, yeah, everybody needs SLPs, but they are so desperate, but they only want to pay me 5 hours a week. So, what's the point? So it's frustrating when you put the time and you put the money into going to graduate school, then the options aren't there. And unlike our pediatric counterparts, we can't really open cash pay clinics. So our pediatric counterparts can open clinics, and of course, they can bill insurance. We can bill insurance too. They could also do cash pay. As medical-based speech pathologists, it's really hard to do cash pay clinics because you cannot accept cash pay if a patient's on a government insurance. And I'm talking about the United States. I'm talking about Medicare and Medicaid. So as med SLPs, the majority of our patients are on Medicaid or Medicare. Yes, you might find a niche maybe with a younger population, a younger maybe COD-COM population, where you could take cash pay or bill insurance, but the flexibility options aren't really there. And again, the most negative thing about billing Medicare, in my opinion, is that the government controls the rates. It's like a monopoly. So say the government decides every SLP service per unit, and per unit could be for us generally anywhere between 15 minutes or an hour because our codes aren't like time-based, they're just one-time based. The government could say, you know what, we're going to pay $30 for that, and that's it. You're at the mercy of that because then what happens is all the insurance companies, they go off of what like Medicare does. They kind of try to keep the same rates, if not less. So you basically have this monopoly on price coming from the US government. And instead of raising our rates like you think they would because of inflation and whatnot, they're dropping our rates. And like right now, just for instance, in the state I live in, I pulled out that $30 an hour code, but actually, and I could be wrong, I haven't checked it recently, but as I understand it, our Medicaid rate in my state per like unit session is like something like 27 or $28. That's not enough to keep rent and lights on in a clinic. So when we're only billing government insurance, it can be really hard to keep our clinics open. So again, this is kind of more of a med SLP issue versus a pediatric SLP issue. Aside from some of the systemic issue about pay and jobs and whatnot, I actually want to talk about the frustrations of being in the med SLP field. So I'm just going to put it out there that there's so much being added to what's considered our scope of practice. I saw somebody on Reddit refer to our scope of practice as like the Cheesecake Factory menu. It's just all over the place. It doesn't really make any sense. So we keep on getting all these things put on our scope of practice. And to be honest, we're not really experts in them. We go to grad school, we have one course in everything. We have one course in dysphagia, one course in aphasia, one course in fluency, one course in motor speech, all these things. You have one course in everything. You graduate, you're supposed to be an expert, but really, we graduate with not a lot of knowledge in anything. So then we're stuck learning on the job and through CEs. And what's happening is we're realizing not only do maybe we as individuals not know what we're doing, but we kind of took on some of these aspects of our field, specifically swallowing, and have been actually doing it wrong for so many years. So when swallowing came into our scope of practice in the 80s, all we were concerned about was aspiration, 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 preventing aspiration. We kind of did certain things for years and years and years without really any evidence to support what we were doing. And now I would just say maybe in the last 10 years, we've actually gotten solid evidence kind of supporting some of the practices in dysphagia and realized what we've been doing has been wrong. So the idea that aspiration of all kinds is bad, typically that's now seen as wrong. Like people can sustain aspiration. Aspiration isn't the end all be all. For years and years and years, if somebody coughed, if somebody was aspirating, we'd put thickener in their drinks. Now we're realizing that the consistency of thickener, that cornstarch, that xanthan gum, is actually more harmful to the body system than aspiration of regular food and drinks. So we're at this point where things have been done a certain way for a long time, and we're realizing it needs to be changed. But then we're hitting these roadblocks where we don't necessarily follow these like standardized practices. For instance, just as a reference, like I have a BRCA2 gene mutation. This is a mutation that puts me at an 80% higher chance of breast cancer. And every time I go see my breast specialist, she pulls out a list of recommendations of this is how we're going to treat it this year. And it seems like that list is always updated year after year after year. It's standards. And I don't really know where that comes from. I don't know if it's the American Cancer Society or what, but I know she's always giving it to me like, these are our standards of practice for this year. There are no standards of practice that change year after year after year for SLPs. It's like, just take whatever knowledge you have and go with it. That's how I feel. And honestly, that's kind of the reason why I'm really stepping back and I'm not practicing clinically right now, is because I'm so tired of SLPs, medical professionals. We're not on the same page. Nobody knows what we're doing. And you might come into a facility where people are really following a protocol, but it's hard to find those places. It's hard to establish those places. And it's this constant like back and forth and infighting of SLPs, of doctors, of nurses. Like for 30 years, we've been putting thickener in drinks. It's been the gold standard. Now it's really not. And we're fighting with each other on changing that. So that's been a frustration. So I would say if you're coming into the medical SLP field now, know that you're hopefully learning in graduate school at the top of what's available as far as evidence-based practice. If you're not, that's another problem, but you're probably learning what needs to be learned, and know that when you come out to the field, people might resist you on those practices, but stick to your guns. You know you're learning the most current information. Hopefully people aren't teaching stuff from like 20 years ago, But, know that what you're learning now needs to be spread throughout the system, and we need people who aren't burned out like me to do it. We need people who are going to make change. Finally, finally, the last thing I want to talk about is really all these ethical problems that we encounter. So, I kind of stepped into the space earlier talking about how we're often just seen as like a factory cranking out billable minutes. And that comes with a lot of ethical considerations. Like, we're often asked to bill inappropriately. Like, I've been asked by many different people to basically bilk Medicare, bilk Medicaid. Like, I've had my actual billing changed by my manager. My manager decided I didn't bill enough that day. She shadow went into my account on the EMR, which, no, I didn't give her my password or anything. That's obviously illegal, but she could shadow me and change my billing, and she did. And I knew it was her because, like, you can obviously call the tech companies and find out who changed your stuff. But you have people doing bad things. You're gonna be asked to pick up patients who aren't appropriate for therapy. And I talked about that earlier. There's this common phrase in medical SLP, build a caseload. I hate that phrase. More so than not, it means pick up people who aren't appropriate for therapy, but who are just gonna go with it, and you can like see them every day and bill Medicare thousands of dollars. It's ridiculous. It's Medicare fraud. So you have all these pressures, and specifically, managers are putting pressures on new grads or on people who, they think are more malleable to go with what they say. Unfortunately, SLPs could often be people pleasers. I know I've been there. My personality's changed a lot through my SLP journey. Honestly, you can probably tell I don't give an F anymore. The only person I'm looking to make happy in my practice, well, two people, myself, and the patient I'm treating, and obviously their families. But as far as managers go, all that stuff, like, we're there for the patients. We need to know that we're doing the right thing and we're giving our patient the right level of care. Managers, different administrators, they might be asking you to do things that are completely unethical, not good for your patients, not good for Medicare, for reimbursement. They might ask you to work off the clock too. Again, you have to do what's right for you, set your boundaries. It's not all about the patients. And that's the other thing with people pleasing, and why I just said earlier, it's about me and the patient. It's not just about the patient, because you can't be working overtime for free. You can't be doing illegal things. You have to stand up for yourself and support yourself and be your own best advocate and set your own boundaries. So all those things, I mean, come into play in the med SLP world. Luckily, I will say I haven't been in a bad ethical situation in a long time, primarily because I've learned how to interview and screen facilities that I'm not going to put myself at that sort of facility anymore. But a lot of jobs out there, they're going to force your limits, unfortunately. So, after all that, I'm going to end with one of the most common questions I get when I tend to go on rants about SLP, and that's, well, would I do it again? Or what career would I do if if I was 21 years old again, what career would I have gone into that would have been, different? What's better? For me, I have to say I don't live my life in regret. I just look forward. So for me, I don't regret becoming a med SLP. I am at a place right now where I primarily work in marketing, and I do like that I get to, do pick up a couple Saturdays a month and do med SLP work. That flexibility does work for me. However, you have to understand that I had a good probably 5, 10 years of work that I felt like was pretty good. And I kind of see things getting maybe a bit worse year after year after year. So for me, if I could go back in time, I wouldn't have done anything different. I'm happy with where my life is. Um, to people starting out now, it's hard for me to say because I don't know if you would regret the field or not. I don't know if you would have the same experience as me. These are just my opinions. And one of the reasons, again, I'm sharing them is because a lot of people only tend to share happy opinions about the field. So I don't know. I do know from working in healthcare all these years, there's a lot of jobs out there that I think would have been a better fit for me that I just didn't know they existed. Jobs like PAs, NPs, the CRNA, like the nurse and anesthesiologist, I can't say that, medical laboratory scientists, the radiology techs, all those things, to be honest with you, I didn't know they existed. And they might have been a better fit. But again, I'm not living my life in regrets. I'm happy where my career is now. I primarily do copywriting and social media marketing for other businesses in the healthcare space. Of course, I run my own brand here, but um, I can't tell you if SLP is the career for you or not. I think it's good that you're watching this video, and you're probably going to watch some of the pro videos of being an SLP where they talk about all the great things too. So feel free to leave comments and questions down below, and thanks for being here, guys.